Thanks for tuning in to Season 4 of Strange, Rare, and Peculiar Homeopathy Podcast, where homeopathy lives, breathes, and evolves with Denise Straiges and Alastair Gray. We'll be exploring modern practice, research, and philosophy, from Hahnemann's radical insights to today's breakthroughs and discoveries. Get ready for homeopathy woes, feedback from pros, and the more you knows.
Hi, folks. How you doing? It's Al, and it's a good morning, good evening, and a good afternoon.
Carly Hour in the house, and I'm so excited because Carly's going to talk with us about what I think is the best thing that's happened to homeopathy in almost 200 years, and that is the North American Homeopathy Examiners, NAHI. Yes, Al is licensed. I'm only certified. I need to get licensed.
You have to fill out the application form.
That's
I think
all.
actually, you just have to sign it because I'm pretty sure I filled in most of it for you.
And I took the exam. I took the exam already. Anyway, but Carly, I am so excited that you're here to talk with us because, as you know, this season 4 is about truth. We are trying to break apart any of the misperceptions around homeopathy, which includes how we practice it, what it is, what are the medicines and all that stuff. But also, I think a lot of us are really interested in how we get the profession to the next level. In other words, homeopathy needs its rightful place in medicine. And the only way that we're going to get there is by being able to demonstrate that we know what we're doing, that we homeopaths who are practicing homeopathy aren't doing crazy stuff. And so when the poo went down, when things went bad, when things went south, you stepped in and you were like, forget it. I'm not going to just sit here and be mad. I'm going to fix a problem. Can you tell us about NAHI and what the heck is NAHI and why should the listeners of the Strange, Rare, and Peculiar podcast stay on to hear more? Because they need to.
Yes, NAHI is the North American Homeopathy Examiners. It is a new organization that was launched this past March by myself and some beloved colleagues. Al is one of them. When things went awry last summer, after about 2 weeks of ranting at my husband about what was going on, he said to me, "You've been ranting about this a lot. You should do something about it." And I said, I can't do so. I can't. Who am I to do that? And he said, you need to do something because you need to stop ranting at me. So what we've done is we have launched a new certifying body that also provides a licensing exam for the new license for professional homeopaths. So NAHI is responsible for administering the HPLEX, which is the first ever professional homeopathy licensing exam. The state of Arizona this past year is the first state to offer to pass legislation creating a professional homeopathy license, meaning that people who are trained professionally can now be licensed in the state of Arizona. And that license is not limited to residents of Arizona. If you are a legal U.S. resident anywhere, you can have this license. If you graduated from an Achina accredited school and you pass an exam approved by the Arizona Licensing Board, which there are now 2 exams approved by them. HPLEX is one, and they also accept the CHD exam.
You said something really important, which is the reason why last summer when you were hollering and your husband said, "Don't just complain, fix a problem." What was the reason? We haven't talked about that.
Yeah. So last summer, the Council for Homeopathic Certification, which is the certifying body that we have all loved and supported and depended on since I've been in homeopathy,
Same.
15 years now, changed a policy and decided to no longer require that applicants for certification need to have had accredited homeopathy education. And this was a huge concern for many in the community. We attempted to have conversations with the CHC about this. I'm pretty sure we did a podcast about this like way back when this was first happening.
Yes.
Petitions were filed, complaints were filed. We attempted to do the right thing and go, straight to the source and ask for conversations. That was not fruitful. We weren't able to get anywhere. People who value high quality education and accredited education were kind of left in this place of like, what do we do now? Because this is a huge issue for our profession, and people who understand and value safe homeopathy and high quality training.
I just want to make sure that anybody who's listening is understanding that NAHI was not started like in competition with the CHC. It was only started because the CHC no longer required that folks who sit for the certifying exam, that they graduate from an accredited school. And there are a million things we could talk about with that, but I want to put a pin in this, right? That last summer, the certifying body that we all depended on, that was in lockstep with ACHINA, the accrediting body. So it's like you go to an accredited school, you graduate, and you take the certifying exam. That certifying exam was relevant because it assumed that there was the oversight of an accredited school. So once you drop that, then the wheels are off the bus. We don't complain without fixing a problem. And Carly actually stepped up. And that's why this is really key. And I think just the last part, Carly mentioned trying to go to the source and fix it. So also important is that not only Carly, but all of us who were invested in this certification model, the accredited school and certification model for decades, right? Didn't want to see it lose its stature and its relevance because so many of us were invested in it. I mean, I carried my CCH for more than 20 years, right? And so, which I don't anymore, because it doesn't mean anything now that they've lost that. So I think it's important to note that, right? That it wasn't started as a competition. It was to figure out how to salvage something that was built since what had been the standard bearer no longer had a standard to bear.
An interesting timing when this was all happening, the new Arizona license was passed. We kind of looked at each other and we were like, we need a licensing exam. And the Arizona license requires accredited education. So thank goodness there is still a credential that requires accredited homeopathy education. And so we said, let's write a licensing exam appropriate for this credential.
Yeah.
And we went to the Arizona licensing board and said, if somebody were to write an exam for you, would you be interested in using that exam? Because at the time they were using only the CHC exam.
Yeah.
And they said, yeah, we'd love to see another exam. And so, myself, and if, you could go to the NAHI website and see our advisory board, those are the folks that were involved in creating this exam. And we somehow, by God's grace, brought it together in like 6 months. and the Arizona licensing board approved it in March. And so we officially launched the organization in March and started administering the exam to folks who are interested in the license. And we also, decided, well, people who value accredited homeopathy training and went to an accredited school don't really have a certification that represents their training anymore, because right. The CCH certification was the only certification available at the time. And because they no longer require accredited training, it kind of left people from accredited schools without a home. And so we said, let's make an alternative certification, and people who want their certification to uphold their education can come and get certified by NAHI. So we have the HPLEX licensing exam, and we also provide the CHP board certification for people who have had accredited homeopathy training. That's what we do.
This is really key. And there are so I want everybody to really think about this because well, we're going to talk about accreditation in a minute because this is how Carly and Al became work husband and wife, is because they served on the Achina board together for 6 years. Other than that, there are a couple of things. Like I mentioned at the start, at the jump, if we're trying to get homeopathy back into its rightful place in medicine, then there's no way that we can do it without actually, we're a self-regulated profession, yeah? And so that means that we have to set standards and set guardrails. So I can't for the life of me understand why, and again, I'm not an insider here, so I need you and Al to kind of flesh through this. And again, with all due respect, because we all loved the CHC, the CCH credential. I carried mine until, I dropped it when they dropped the Achina requirement. But can you guys, with your experience and insider knowledge, think of a reason why they would have dropped that criteria? It doesn't make sense to me as an outsider. Al, what do you think about that?
It's simply about the money, follow the money and the numbers. And the numbers, well, I'm going to go into the weeds, so bear with. If you're running a validated examination, there'll be a requirement that each year a certain number of people need to sit for your test for it to maintain its validation. And quite simply, the CHC was struggling to get enough people interested in their certification to meet the validation requirements of their examination. And so if, it's you can just imagine that, these folks sitting around a boardroom are going, we've got a problem, let's fix it. And so, someone says, why don't we lower the bar so we can attract more people in? Because there's lots of people apparently going to unaccredited schools or that are out there and they want to sit our examination. And that's as simple as that. It's numbers and the money.
And so, okay, let me make sure that I heard this right. So the CHC, because one of the things that they talk about is that their exam is validated, although they use the term accredited, which I think people get confused because it's not about accredited schools, right? So the CHC has an exam that has been validated by ICE. And so that's good. That's really nice. It's a psychometric evaluation. I don't know all the language, so I won't get into the weeds on it, but that exam has been validated for its appropriateness in various ways. Okay.
Yeah.
So when there weren't enough people taking that exam, they dropped the standard to get more people in, because in order to keep the validation of the exam, they needed a certain number of people joining in. And so they decided to go with people who had gone to non-accredited schools as a way to boost their numbers. That's pretty much it. So what is the implication of that? Why? Because somebody showed me that there is a new school that is using accreditation that has nothing to do with homeopathy. Why does it matter? When you guys were on the board, so for a while, I don't know if we said this already, Al served as president of Achina for 2 terms, and Carly, you had several roles on the board and as an employee of Achina.
Yeah, I was a board member for a very short time and then was invited to be the administrative staff person, which means I just kind of did board stuff, but got paid for it and no longer had a vote on anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was kind of like the singular staff person who did all the administrative work for about 6 years.
So from the two of you, you've got the insider perspective on Achina, and Al, you have been involved in homeopathy school accreditation and sort of all of the validation in multiple countries, right? And so you two, for me, I'm a hack at this stuff, right? It's not my area of expertise. But when you two first heard this and were very concerned, I was like, oh, wait, there's something here. Why is accreditation so important?
In particular, Achina accreditation is important for homeopathy training because Achina has standards specific to curriculum content and clinical training. Yes, they have all kinds of other accreditation standards around administration and governance and financial and legal things and faculty. But the biggest section of the accreditation standards is Standard 8, and that is where it's pages and pages of what does the homeopathy curriculum look like? How is it delivered? What is the content? How is clinic taught? What are the clinical competencies? How is the school assessing a student's clinical competence before they graduate them and send them off to practice on the unsuspecting public? So ACHINA accreditation is so important for homeopathy because it's homeopathy specific. There are other accreditors out there that some homeopathy schools are accredited by, but those accreditors have nothing to do with homeopathy. They're probably only looking at the administrative and financial and governance areas of the school. So ACHINA is the only homeopathy accreditor that exists in the North America.
All right. So what I'm hearing is that there are two things, right? So there's one is accreditation in general is important because it's basically consumer protection for the student. So that's good. That's one step. But then the other step is when it's homeopathy specific, because if we go back to sort of the purpose of this podcast, right, which is to really talk about what homeopathy is, because it's been sort of misinterpreted, misappropriated, and now people literally give medicine to sick children based on how they feel. Yeah, it's like, well, even though this doesn't really fit with what, the literature says, I've got this intuitive hit that I should do X, Y, and Z. That's terrifying. It's really terrifying. And so what you're saying is that when someone graduates from a school that is ACHINA accredited, it means that not only do they have the consumer protection part, but also there's oversight for the school itself, for the institution. So like if you're a person who's kind of new to homeopathy and you want to study, do you want to go to a school that nobody's looking out for, saying that what what the education you're going to get is valid, that is even related to homeopathy? Well, yeah, you want to make sure that that's there, right?
So important for the consumer too was this practitioner trained in actual homeopathy?
Right.
Did the school actually teach homeopathy according to the way Hahnemann gave us instructions to do so? And are they clinically competent to care for people and suffering children and vulnerable sick people?
This to me is the biggest deal. This is clinical training, because so if you're not like familiar with the ins and outs of homeopathy education, you might not realize that some people never actually see a client with somebody watching them. There are some schools where in your first semester, like when you're still brand new, you don't even know how to use the tools of the homeopath, you're seeing clients and making a recommendation for them to actually take a medicine. Or some people, their training is just by video. There is a school that has videos of Al, clinic videos of Al when he had a full head of hair. Al, I know you get tired of me saying it. When did you shave your head? Right?
Yeah, I was in the desert.
Yeah, he was in the desert of Australia on the eve of the year 2000. So let's just think about that for a minute, not just from a style perspective that you get to see Al with a long ponytail, but
a fine head of hair.
Head of hair, right? But 26 years ago, we weren't having conversations about autoimmunity. There was no such thing as PANS and PANDAS. Homeopaths were just barely seeing cases of autism. There was no post-COVID issue to deal with. It just was a completely different marketplace. So imagine that you are learning how to do homeopathy with material from 26 years ago, clinical material, and you don't have the live experience of going through a clinic and deconstructing those cases in real time. If you go to an ACHINA accredited school, they now, I think, are making sure, because I know that there was a time when some of the schools were accredited who were using video curriculum, but I think that that's no longer allowed, right? The video clinic? Or not?
You mean like the asynchronous?
Asynchronous recorded clinic. I think ACHINA now you have to have live clinic. Am I right?
Yeah. Well, the learning technologies are such that it's a no-brainer. That clinic is live, and if it's online or face-to-face, that's up to the provider. But old cherry-picked videos, no.
Yeah.
But Denise, you're focusing, you're talking about homeopathy accreditation in schools, but accreditation actually means something else. You know, when you go out for dinner in New York, what's the first thing you do?
Oh, you look at the number, the rate or the letter rating on a restaurant, because if you go to a C-rated restaurant, there's going to be rat poop in your food.
Right. That's exactly it. And that's essentially what educational accreditation is. It's not in the food industry, it's in the education industry. Everyone that, I don't know, there's so many, it doesn't matter. But the point is that it is a stamp of quality assurance by some folks that have come around with a clipboard and looked in the corners for mouse poop and looked for evidence of cockroach activity, and they go, yep, A, B, C, or whatever it might be. Yeah. And that's exactly what happens with educational accreditation.
And that should matter, right? You know, we did that, we did a podcast on the Flexner Report, I don't know, a couple months ago, and we got so much feedback on it because there is this false narrative out there that the Flexner Report, this was the assessment of medical education in the beginning of the 20th century, and that it was commissioned to fight against homeopathy. And it wasn't anything of the sort. It was that there was no consistency in medical education in the late 19th, early 20th century. And so the idea was to look at and create a set of standards for safety. And so, like, when you would go to medical school in the 1880s and 90s, you might only have a 6th grade education. There was no consistency on what facilities were like or what outcomes were, how outcomes were measured, and so on and so forth. And so the Flexner Report was this big overhaul of medical education, which at the time was homeopathy medical schools and allopathic medical schools, and they were all subject to the same scrutiny. In other words, you needed to demonstrate that you were providing good education. And Flexner said, this isn't about dogma, it's about the quality of education. Yes, there are some homeopathy schools that are doing it, great, and there are some that aren't. Yes, there are some allopathic medical schools that are doing it, great, and there are some that aren't, and everyone should be assessed by what they are providing. Well, the same really, I think, needs to be done in homeopathy education, and it's not fun. We just did our reaccreditation over the last year. It has to be re-upped every 5 years. And, you know, I was only involved in the last phase of it, which was I got to be the fresh eyes reviewing it. And I was like, holy macaroni, there's so much that we were being asked to demonstrate that we do. And at the end of the day, I think to myself, well, if I'm spending, $20,000 on education, I want to make sure that I'm getting out of it what I'm expecting. And so that's what, accreditation is a combination of the legal, the ethical, and the actual material that a student should be expecting to get, right? Yeah. And so that's what, so when the CHC dropped it without consulting the community, and I feel bad because I think that there are some people that are so invested in their history with the CHC that they had some blinders on. There were a couple of, our old cronies who got really mad that we were fighting back against the dropping of Achina. And I wish that they would talk to us about why they were willing to let go of such an important, quality.
Well, and I think that was the indignation that a lot of us were feeling, especially like myself, Al, people who have worked in this kind of regulatory field for a long time and worked very closely with CHC leadership over the years in making sure that we were collaborating in the appropriate ways that these organizations needed to, so that we could carry the profession forward.
Yeah.
And then all of us, and usually when a major policy is changed like that, there is conversation with the other stakeholders and problem solving and saying, like Al said, they recognize they had a problem. We need more numbers. and we would have conversations with them about that. How can we help you? How can we increase our enrollment in our schools so that we can send you more people applying for your exam? Like, there was a lot of problem solving going on over the years where we were trying to support each other's organizations. And then all of a sudden, without any conversation whatsoever, we find out that they changed the policy to drop the requirement of accredited education without any consult, no conversation with stakeholders. It was just, this is what we're doing, and we're not interested in hearing your complaints.
And they had a big leadership change, didn't they? I mean, like half the board left. So it was not like, it wasn't as if everybody involved was into it.
Yeah. So I think that's where the indignation came in, and we all, suffered through that for about a month. And then, and my husband had to hear it. And then he was like, well, do something about it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we decided to do something about it. And Nahi was born. And one thing that we haven't talked about that I think is important to note about Nahi's CHP certification is that we have decided, because of all of the wild and wacky homeopathy prescribing that is happening in the world right now, we've decided to take a very kind of hard and clear stance on standards of practice for this certification. And we are very clear that if you carry this certification, you are practicing according to Hahnemannian standards. We're not doing the wild and wacky stuff. We are doing what Hahnemann said to do, one remedy at a time, based on the unique symptom picture, totality of symptoms, characteristic symptoms. That's what CHP certification is. So for the consumer, if you are looking for actual homeopathy, you can be confident that someone with the CHP is practicing actual homeopathy.
I mean, that's a big deal because, we've got 230 years of clinical evidence of the efficacy of this application of not just the medicines, but the application of principles for giving them. But a lot of this other stuff is really new. And, 2 podcasts ago, I think it was, where we talked about, look, we're not trying to pass judgment on anybody who's deciding to use, remedies that are prepared according to the, homeopathic pharmaceutical guidelines in ways that are not homeopathy. Just call it something else so that you can start measuring your outcomes, right? Conduct longitudinal research. We've got a lot of that in homeopathy, but we don't really know how some of the misapplication or different, I don't want to say mis because that could be negatively implied. Someone who is using it's like an off-label prescription, right? People do it all the time. I just taught a case at the AIH conference last weekend where it was a kid who has Crohn's but he was prescribed off-label a prescription that was not approved for pediatric use. And for a time, there were risks involved, but it was a stopgap until such time as we were able to, help him be healed enough to not need the medication. Off-label prescriptions happen. Rogaine is not a grow hair medicine. It's a heart medicine that also grows hair. And so there you have it, right? So what I think would be important is that for folks who are using the medicines in ways that they're trying stuff out, from an ethical standpoint, let people know you're using them off script, that's not, like, we need to be really clear with the world that these medicines were developed in accordance with a set of principles. And I love that Nahi is saying, look, we're the place where we're just going to, come together as a group of people who are practicing according to the guidelines of safety that we have had for the last couple of 100 years, right? And without judgment. But we do need to say we do need to be clear about what it is and what it isn't. So how are you doing that? Do you have it do they sign on to this? You have to have a secret handshake?
I try to be as clear as I can up front with people that this is the expectation. And if your practice falls in line with these standards, then great. We would love to have you. If it doesn't, that's okay. But this may not be the credential for you. There are other credentials that you can go get. And that's the nice thing is, we live in a society, this is a free market. People have options.
Yeah.
You can go get this CCH certification. You can have the CHP certification. You can go get the LHP license. People are free to choose which credential best aligns with their practice. And we're just...
For our old timer friends, by the way, this is not like, oh, I follow, Schulten's methodology or Sankra. This is not about that. This is what we're seeing. If you're not familiar with what's been coming down the pike, we're seeing people who are giving dozens and dozens and dozens of remedies at a time or in a very short period of time. And we're seeing outcomes that are perhaps not in alignment with what we consider to be the restoration of health. So this isn't like, asking people to sign on to a, oh, I practice, I'm whatever. It's more like there's homeopathy as we've known it. So like if you haven't been exposed to what's happening now, then you don't even have to think about it, because this is what we've all done. We never had to talk about it before because there's never anything like it. Now there's just, I think the excitement around homeopathy has brought about free market on steroids. And so before somebody gets hurt on our watch, those of us who are kind of aligned with the way that we've all practiced for forever. And by the way, get good results, because I know that there are people out there who go, oh, you can't get good results with, single remedy prescribing. Well, we measure our outcomes, so we know that we are getting really good results. Al, what are the stats from the outcomes in our clinic?
When you say we, you're talking about the HHN clinic.
Yeah, and all the, everything comes through AHE in our clinics.
Yeah, we're effective between 85 and 86% of the time with acute and chronic prescribing.
That's not too shabby. That is not too shabby. And so imagine that some of these other things like the isopathy and tautopathy, if those are as effective as people think they are, that's amazing. Then just, let's start measuring the outcomes, get an IRB, use a validated outcomes measurement tool, like really do what we have to do as legitimate, researchers, and bring your data to the table. That would be incredible, because then we all benefit from it. But until such time as we have evidence of not just efficacy, but also safety. So longitudinal evidence that if some of these practices, which are using the remedies in ways that have never been used before, like dozens at a time, or lots of high potencies or nosodes or tautopathic drugs given in succession or at the same time. We just don't know. And for those who are getting good results, we've got to get that documented. But until then, if like the consumer wants to find just a homeopath who practices, with the 230 years of clinical evidence behind them, then this is a way to get that, which I love. Hey, there's another thing too about it. Your exam, you can take it any time, right? So it's not like there are 2 exam cycles, right? Can you talk about that? I think that's going to be a big deal.
Yeah. So the exam is available anytime online from the comfort of your own home, or if you want to go take it at a proctoring center or a testing center, that is totally available as well. But it's ready when you are. So you don't have to wait till a certain time of year or a certain cycle to apply and open the exam. You can apply anytime. You can study for however long you want to, and then when you're ready, you take it. Additionally, it's only 100 questions, and it's a 2-hour time limit. So it's, I think we made this exam knowing that people who are taking it went to have received an accredited education. And because we know that they've received that accredited education, we know that the school has signed off on certain assessments and has assessed their competencies, their skills in certain ways that are required by accreditation. So this exam does not have to be so full of content to test, because we know the schools have already reviewed each of these candidates before they've graduated. So this exam is really just testing, are you a safe practitioner? Yeah. Do you know how to appropriately interact with your clients? Do you know when to refer? Do you know when it's an emergency situation that needs to be referred? Do you know the basics of how to appropriately and effectively analyze a case? Do you understand the concept of the organon and how to apply those into your practice? It's that level. So 100 questions. And
this is really key, though, because the CHC exam is still that, but without the accreditation. So like when I took the CHC exam more than 20 years ago, it was a 2 full day exam because there weren't accredited schools then at the time when I took it. So,
me too. Yep, yeah. Me too.
So the assumption was that they had to test everything. So it was like you had a materia medica portion of the exam, you had a repertory portion, you had your medical sciences, you had to do cases and all that. And then you had to submit cases. I had to submit like a huge deck of stuff. So in the absence of the accredited school doing the work, then the person who's issuing the certification needs to then do that work, right? So we used to have to take a 2 full day exam and submit cases. The reason that the exam can be shorter is because the onus of that is on the accredited institution. So the NAHI exam can be what it is because the schools, the accredited, ACHINA accredited schools, are responsible and are overseen for making sure that they are validating the students' capacity to do the job. So how is the CHC keeping the same exam without, like, they're only testing as if a person went to an accredited school, but they don't have to go to an accredited school? Like, what is the...
That is the question, isn't it? That is the question that we have been asking that has yet to be answered. And I don't know if it ever will be answered.
Ostensibly, they've got like a committee who's just deciding. Yeah.
Yeah. But again, we've asked, who's on the committee? What does your assessment look like?
That the committee members aren't from schools that aren't accredited and just are getting their people through because they go, I taught them everything and I know they're good. I mean, I wouldn't want to be the person who was judge and jury. It's like, there's a reason we have multiple branches of government. I don't know. In other countries, like how does it work in other countries? Like, you really liked the way the American system worked originally, didn't you?
The structure of the profession, a non-regulated profession, was great. And it was great. There are a few exceptions. I remember the CHC and Nash had a fisticuffs at one point because they weren't staying in each other's lanes. But where you've got advocacy for the professional, where you've got certification for the professional that protects the public, and obviously advocacy for the profession, protecting the professional, then you've got the role of ACHINA or the accreditor that deals only with the schools. And what you've got now, since the stupidity of last summer, is you've got the certifying body who are now assuming the role of education experts. And they're just, I can tell you right now, they ain't, and it's a big fat mess. Now, it's not as if it's perfect in any other part of the world because they have the same challenges. And sometimes, one organization does 3 roles. That's the case in, say, New Zealand or in the UK. But the structure we had really worked. But the key was communication between the certifying body and the accrediting body. Gonna fail the bits.
Oh my gosh. I mean, one of the reasons why I find this to be troubling is that I feel like we're on the precipice of homeopathy really getting its spot back. Like, the medical system is having the challenges that it's having, especially when it comes to like complex chronic issues that are the result of, kind of misappropriation of like antibiotics and things where we've got dysbiosis happening, right? So people are turning to homeopathy and other integrative medical modalities because it works. And if we want to make systemic change, then we have to show a level of consistency with the providers of these, what would be considered new modalities, even though we know that our modality is not new, right? And so like it's the onus is on us to do this self-regulation, which is kind of tough because like I remember feeling really bad for you two when you were in Achina leadership and seen as the bad guys. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, wait a second. You guys are not getting the fact that these are your friends who are actually in this, like insiders who know what the profession is about. To me, that seemed like a good thing rather than appealing to an external regulator that doesn't understand homeopathy. But, and I might be wrong here, but I kind of felt like you two were getting crap because of elevation of standards, like that there were people that didn't want to reach the higher standard. But am I just
I
saying?
mean, that was essentially it. You had a group of schools that were often run by, say, a charismatic personality that did not want to get bogged down in the compliance nitty gritty, and did not also not want to hire an education consultant to do it, or at least were reluctant to do that. And that's when you start to see the accreditor, as the policeman that's here to harass us. And that's not the ethos of accreditation at all. The ethos of accreditation is collaboratively continuing to improve. And so the consultant is sometimes, in the best case scenario, the accreditor. And so when you've got this dialogue and communication with the accreditor about how are you doing, we noticed that 5 years ago, these were the challenges we noticed. How have you gone with those? Show us, And then when you get a really good reviewer that comes to your school and says, and starts to triangulate questions, and says, okay, well, let's have a look at your retention rates. Okay, so you had a challenge a couple of years ago. What went on? And then you can if you're when you've got a reviewer that is looking at a school and see something, then they go and triangulate the information, just like you do with your teenagers. It's like you want to know, is what I just heard, is that actually accurate? And of course, if you triangulate the information, you're going to get a much clearer picture. So you go and talk to the students and you talk to the staff and you start to build up a really, really clear idea about what's going on in this joint, and then give it the rating that it deserves. So for me, I found it beyond frustrating. And then, I just didn't really want to be involved anymore with, mainly for my blood pressure, with seeing me as part of a police force that was coming to take away something which was precious. And, that is not it. That is not accreditation. That's accreditation at its worst.
And you know what? I'm just thinking about this, that me as the resident Sicilian over here, that I would be a person speaking out for oversight. It's sort of on its face ridiculous. So you can't see, because we're not seeing this on video, but Carly is cracking up because she knows how I am. Like, I'm the one who's always like, I'm not doing that. I'm going to come at it from a different way because I hadn't thought of this until Al, you were just talking, but I wonder if it's just a maturing profession, and combined with the burgeoning interest in homeopathy. In other words, for a while, we all kind of we were all doing our best to just get people to like be interested in homeopathy. And we would all have our little schools, and we would all get together and talk about what it was like to be an educator in homeopathy. And it was pretty consistent. Like, I don't remember there being a lot of dissonance between educational factions, really. And I think now it's so different. And maybe it's hard for the homeopathy community that has sort of the institutional leadership or intergenerational leadership of folks who have been around for a long time. Like, I would say that in American homeopathy, like, I don't know, I've been around it for a pretty long time. So I saw the middle part, but like there's a generation like before me of folks who maybe are still seeing it through that lens. I don't know. Right. But like it's different now. Like I think we all need to step up and look at what's happening today and what the market looks like today. And if people who have been around a long time, they're probably not listening to our podcast, but they might not realize that there are that there are schools with like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that are like homeopathy diploma mills that are not actually teaching best practices. There are that like people who are of a certain age who aren't on social media that don't know that people are making remedy recommendations for complex conditions on social media, like on Facebook, you know? Yeah.
And that's I am always really mindful because I just, you know me, I just say things like usually rub somebody the wrong way. But when I am kind of preaching about the importance of educational accreditation, and that I firmly believe that if you have a homeopathy certificate or a license, that you should have to go to an accredited school. That is my belief. But that doesn't mean that I believe that people who did not attend an accredited school are not good practitioners, because homeopathy educational accreditation is fairly new. I can't remember when Achino, I don't know the exact date that Achino really started kind of consistently trying to help schools get accredited, but it's not something that's older than 20 years, I don't think. And so,
because I remember being, and I don't remember if I was a student or just involved at NAH when the Achina, I think they might have been the first school. I might be making that up. I might be wrong, but I remember
they were one of the first.
Yeah.
I think it was the Canadian college that was the first. But
okay.
But my point is when I say things like when I'm advocating for educational accreditation, that does not mean that somebody's education was not of value or that they did not receive a good education if they didn't go to an accredited school. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But given what is happening now in the profession and the kinds of education that we know people are receiving, like the examples you just gave.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important now. And there are so many amazing practitioners out there that didn't attend an accredited school.
Right.
And we all know that. But education back then was different than it is now.
Exactly.
And we, unfortunately, because of social media, because of, online educational technologies, the way that education can be delivered now so easily to anybody in the globe, from anybody who wants to start up a school.
Yeah.
We have to have guardrails in place for this profession and for our consumers and for our vulnerable kids who are really sick. That's where I'm coming from when I get preachy about the importance of accreditation.
Yeah.
Preach, sister.
Are there ways for people that people can get grandfathered in for, what does that look like?
Achina has recently completed a list of school. This is actually for the purpose of the license, because the Arizona Licensing Board asked Achina to, what do we do with these people who were educated a long time ago and accreditation wasn't a thing?
Yeah.
So they asked Achina to do a review of schools that existed prior to 2015 and make a list of schools that could be accepted for folks who attended those schools and want to get the license. So that list is on our website. I think it might not be posted on the website yet, but if anybody wants that list, they can email me and I'll send it to them. But I think there's a list of about 15 to 20 schools for folks who were educated prior to 2015, that if you attended one of those schools, you can be eligible for the license and the CHP certification.
Huh. That's really cool. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's new. They just published that list about a few weeks ago.
One of the things that I think about with all this is that, it's going to be a while because of sort of the disparities in the levels of education, what was available. I remember when, our school now, our clinical training is delivered all live online, which means we can do tons and tons and tons of it, which means we get practitioners who have more experience, or students that get more exposure. But back in the day, I was running a school before that technology was there, and you just couldn't. We used to really have to think of creative ways to get people exposed to, lots of clinical experience. So it's good that that like people aren't being kind of discriminated against because something didn't exist in their time. I think that's really important. But like, this is the going forward, right? Because we really need to make this happen. It's our time, people.
It's that time.
It's that time, which also means I think it's lunchtime. I'm starving. Do we have anything else we need to say before we wrap up this taco stand?
I liked hanging out with you.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
Always fun. Because it's early, it wasn't cocktail hour, because otherwise Carly would be having one of Al's fancy
giant old fashions.
Yeah. A double. Make it a double.
It would be old-fashioned o'clock.
That would have been a very different podcast.
It really would. Every now and again, we do SRP After Dark, and they don't always make it to the air. And for very good reason. All right, people, thanks for listening. Thanks for loving homeopathy. And tell all your friends. We forgot to say, tell your friends, share the links. Get
like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe. And yeah. All right. Bye, everybody.
Ciao.
Bye, everyone.
See ya.
Have you ever dreamed of becoming a homeopath? Join the Academy of Homeopathy Education for a live Q&A on November 20th. Get an inside look at accredited training, real clinical experience, and a community that supports you every step of the way. Reserve your spot today at ahe.online and see what real homeopathy education looks like. You know about arnica. You've helped with a cough before. But what happens when your go-to remedies stop working? When symptoms move, change shape, or just don't make sense anymore? That's when it's time to get help from someone trained. At Homeopathy Help Now, you get real homeopathic care with student practitioners supervised by certified professionals. It's thoughtful, safe, and affordable. Visit homeopathyhelpnow.com to request a consultation today.